Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. At long last, it is time for my review of Akshan, the Rogue Sentinel, as I have now had a full week worth of games behind my belt in order to sort of get a sense for where this champion is at. And unfortunately, he is nowhere near as strong as I think anyone thought he was going to be. I know there was a lot of hubbub, especially about his revive, but after having played him quite a few times, I can safely say that Akshan is not very good, and that the revive is not going to be nearly as impactful as a lot of people think it's going to be. I think Akshan was at like a 34% win rate on day one. He's been hotfix buffed twice now, which I do disagree with the second version. The first one, fine. The second one, I think Riot needs to give him a little bit more time for people to learn him, especially given that his kit is a little hard to get used to. But either way, I do think that with time, people will definitely learn how to play him better, and I do think Riot should be hands-off on him for the next month or so in order to give the player base even more time to sort of learn the champion. And definitely, he's at the same point as Gwen, where I can see potential for this champion. I think there's a lot less potential with Akshan than with Gwen. But there's potential here, and I feel like the more people play him, the better he's going to look, but I don't think he's ever going to be a professional staple just based on a bunch of things about his kit and how he works. But let's go ahead and talk about him, starting, of course, with the good things. The biggest thing here is that Akshan's kit is not nearly as overwhelming as it looks like on first blush. He only really has two damaging abilities with his passive and his Q. His E is pretty situational. The biggest thing here is if you treat it like Corki Valkyrie or just on a rocket jump, where you can use it if you want to be aggressive, but because that's also your escape, you want to be very, very careful about using it aggressively, because if you don't get the kill, you're not going to get the reset, and you're not going to be able to get out afterwards, right? So if you go in and realize you've bitten off more than you can chew, you're either flashing away or you're dying, right? Because you don't have your E available for in that regard. So in that sense, Akshan is really focused on his Q and his passive in lane, which is actually pretty good because he has a lot of sort of fun moment-to-moment gameplay elements with his passive and with his Q that make it the last hitting experience quite nice, and the sort of trading experience pretty fun regardless of him actually using his E. His passive has a bunch of different things you can do with it, actually. I know a lot of people are talking about, oh, it's so overloaded, but realistically speaking, the damage is worse than something like a Vayne Silverbolt's proc. The double tap isn't nearly as good as Lucian's double tap is. Like, there are a bunch of elements about it that just make it generally not as strong as those abilities on their own, but because he has the flexibility of canceling the second shot for bonus movement speed, or using both shots in order to get a passive proc, or throwing the Q first, seeing if it hits, and then going for a double tap to proc his passive, get movement speed, chase you down afterwards, there's a lot of sort of fun, different things he can do with his passive, at the very least, which actually makes it a pretty entertaining part of his kit. More so than a lot of other 3-hit passives. A lot of other 3-hit passives are just kind of hit the guy 3 times and you get bonus damage. Akshan, I think, has a lot more thought process behind what he actually wants to do if he wants that second shot. So the other thing is it counts as like a second auto attack entirely. So if you can click fast enough, you can actually cancel the second shot into a separate minion. It's not as reliable as something like the Lucian double tap, where that's coded to seek out another low health target nearby and automatically shoot it. Akshan, you do have to issue the command separately, but you do have the ability to kind of stack up 2 stacks of your passive on 2 separate minions, and then blast one and then blast the other with a second shot and kind of get both of them. So there's some kind of fun mechanical things you can do here. The Q is also a little entertaining. It doesn't do nearly as much damage as you would expect, but the extension means that Akshan can get some hits on champions from quite a distance away. I think I accidentally killed an enemy support by throwing the boomerang through an entire wave of minions and killing her like between her 2 towers, which is really funny. Not that that's a thing that's going to happen in every game, but there are some sort of gameplay elements to it in that it's a very short range, but if you hit a minion, all of a sudden you're in range to hit your opponent when they thought they were safely out of range. So in that regard, it's kind of a fun ability, as long as you can hit at least the first target, and then the boomerang will kind of take care of the rest. The E is really, really tricky to learn, guys. I'm not going to lie. To a certain extent, it's almost a bad because of how tricky it can be to figure out. But if you are able to figure out how to use his E, like, Akshan's E is very, very strong. The biggest thing here is that because it does a good amount of damage, it has a pretty good movement speed on the swing. You're able to sort of use it to get yourself out of a lot of situations and get some really nice, big, long arcs where you're constantly firing the whole way around. It's kind of a fun ability to use. The fact that it resets as well means that you have some options in later game teamfights where you get a kill, you swing in, you get a kill, you reset, you swing on to continue chasing enemies, you get a kill, you reset, you continue swinging on to chase down the next guy. There are some kind of fun things to do with it, but it's a very tricky ability to use. I've had to really, figure out that you cannot issue any commands at all. You basically have to be hands off the keyboard while you're swinging, or he cancels it and goes into the little dash at the end. So I still cancel it more often than not, but either way, it's the kind of ability where I'm like, okay, if you're good at this champion and you know how to use this ability, like, you're going to make Akshan look really, really good. And his ultimate, I think, is really fun, both from a play at with and play against standpoint. Like, the interesting thing about it is it does show you how much damage you're going to do, because it's all like percent max HP damage. So you do know the health bar turns red on the enemy champion you've targeted when you're going to do enough damage with the ult to kill him. But because the shots can be body blocked, there's still the tension there of, yeah, I'm not going to do enough damage to kill him with these, but also I may just want all the shots to land, as opposed to waiting too long and then pulling the trigger, and then the enemy champion can get behind a tower or gets behind minions and doesn't die to this, regardless of the fact that the shots would have killed him. So there is some sort of fun tension here. I haven't done the R channel and then swing on the rope in order to guarantee the shots, but it does seem like that would be really, really powerful if you're mechanically skilled enough in order to pull that play off. The W, realistically, guys, the W is there for the bonus gold. Akshan absolutely needs to snowball, and I'll touch on this in a little bit as well, but he absolutely needs to snowball, and the biggest reason you're going to go scoundrel chasing, especially in the early phases of the game when your roams are going to have more impact, is because you want to cash in on the bonus gold in order to try to get ahead of the curve and get your items going. I think that's one of the biggest things that Akshan has going for him, in a similar fashion to Twisted Fate and Draven, how they have gold generation passives, and a lot of their power comes from the fact that they're just going to be ahead on items versus their opponent without necessarily having gameplay power. It's why Akshan can kind of function as an assassin with only 2 damaging abilities, because he does have the ability to just be items ahead of you and therefore do more damage than you would expect, even though he doesn't have a W for damage, because he does have that bonus gold that he's generating off of the scoundrel kills. With all that said, let's talk about the bad. The biggest thing here is that he is extremely feast or famine. We did expect this, but it feels a lot worse than a normal assassin because his mobility is significantly lower than a normal assassin's. If you consider someone like Talon or Zed or LeBlanc and how they have the ability to kind of go in and out of fights or to nope out of fights they don't want to take, Akshan doesn't really have that ability. He has one movement skill that is body blockable. If he gets CC'd, he immediately stops, and after that he has nothing. His W detection range is so large that it is not an in-combat cooldown. Never ever press W if you're in combat, because it doesn't do anything for you. You don't get bonus movement speed unless there's a scoundrel you can move towards while you're out of combat. The detection range is so massive that basically, even if you're standing in the middle of the lane, the enemy champion can still totally see you from where you're at. And because it wears off so fast as well, that also doesn't do him any favors. So realistically, he has no way of bailing out of a fight unless he's able to get a kill and then reset that cooldown on his grappling hook so he can try to grapple away again. So because of this, his target access is good, but also he doesn't have the ability to get out as easily. Like Tristana with rocket jump, if she rocket jumps in, she better make sure she's getting that kill or she's not getting back out again. And it's like that with Akshan as well. The other thing with him, though, is that his DPS is not nearly as good as a marksman's is, and that's part of the trade-off he gets for having some of the tools he's allowed to have in his kit. But it also means that if you're really looking for the just sort of face-melting amounts of damage a marksman like Aphelios can put out in late-game teamfights, Akshan is never going to do that much damage. He just isn't, guys. Even if you hit full build with him, he'll do good damage, but he's not just going to burn through tanks like it's nobody's business. And so because of this, he kind of has the worst of both worlds, right? He has the DPS of a marksman, but he doesn't have very good DPS. He has burst potential and target access of an assassin, but he doesn't do as much burst as you would expect. He doesn't have as good of target access or mobility as an assassin, so he just kind of sits in the middle ground and is kind of disappointing in both regards. And because he has no utility in the kit, we'll talk about the revive here in a bit, but he has no utility in the kit, so if you fall behind this champion, you are worthless. Like, you do nothing for the team. Your only hope is to maybe get a last hit on somebody somewhere and get that bonus gold to maybe get you back into the game, but it's really, really brutal when you're behind on this champion. And this, I think, is part of the problem I have with Akshan, is that he is a mid lane marksman. And if you are familiar with mid lane marksmen like Lucian or Tristana, part of the reason they're super strong is because they have good level 2 all-ins. These are the kind of champions that can throw their weight around against mages and even some assassins in the mid lane because of how scary they can be at level 2 or at the very least at lower levels. And Akshan doesn't have that power. He kinda can do some things, especially if he can like land a random Q on you from a distance, then walk at you and go for the hookshot play and get some more damage on you and maybe run away with the shield afterwards. Like, he can kinda sorta do it, but he's nowhere near as powerful at doing it as these other mid lane marksmen that weren't designed for the lane. And so in that regard, one of the reasons you play a mid lane marksman is to have that bully presence, and Akshan just straight up does not do that. So you're picking a mid lane marksman that isn't going to bully the enemy champion, who has no utility, who's going to fall off really hard if he does fall behind, and it's sort of a recipe for disaster for the champion, I think. And for those of you who are saying, you know, okay, but Hell Knight, what about the revive? The revive, I could make a whole video about this, and I may do that in the future, but the revive is utility, yes, but it's so hard to extract value out of that ability because so many things have to go right. An enemy champion has to have killed an ally. You have to be close enough that your W will give you the bonus movement speed because otherwise you're never going to close the gap. You only have a minute to get there, and then you have to kill an enemy champion that has killed a friend. If that enemy champion is 4-0, you're not going to kill him, right? Unless he's like literally one hit from death. If he's got even half his health left, Akshan is not going to do enough burst damage out of stealth to just insta-kill the guy, and then you're going to lose the fight thereafter. Like, there's just so many things that have to kind of go right for it. And even if you do get the kill in the early stages of the game, or even into the mid-game, your ally's already revived, or you save them maybe 5 seconds on the revive. It's not that much value. I can count on one hand the number of times I've gotten a revive, and it's mattered in the slightest. And realistically, the only reason it mattered is because, oh, the ally respawned and was, respawned early enough that they could actually, save one of my low-health allies who was running away from the single enemy champion that was left after that team fight. Like, that was it. There's some value here in being able to, if you play him bot lane, for example, being able to go for a trade play where they're trying to kill your support and you're trying to kill the enemy AD carry, because even if they do kill your support, you just kill him back and then your support revives. Obviously, you both cashed in gold there, but your support is alive, so you're sort of mitigating that play a little bit in your favor. But generally speaking, the revive is not enough value, I think, in order to justify Akshan as a pick. It's not really utility in that regard. It is, but it also isn't. Like, you're not picking Akshan for the revive. Like, honestly, I will say that right there. You're not picking him for the revive. You're picking him because you want a mid lane marksman who's going to be doing some damage, who has this sort of interesting play pattern, who has the ability to do this grappling hook play. And that, I think, is part of the problem, because then it gets back to, well, why would I play him when I could play Lucian and at least bully my enemy laner, as opposed to getting bullied by everyone else. Now, all of this, none of this is to say that he's not necessarily a underpowered pick. The pros haven't gotten their hands on him yet, and I'm sure given enough time, a lot of people will have played Akshan enough to be good at him and to be good at extracting value. And of course, there's going to be someone who reverses a quadra kill with Akshan in a late game team fight, wins the game off of it, and everyone will talk about how broken it is. But I think in 90 to 95% of games, Akshan's revive will have little to no impact on the game you play. And the only reason it mattered was because you got bonus gold from that W to either get you back in the game or to put you further ahead. That's about it. And I think that's part of the issue with Akshan, is that Riot really were concerned about how powerful the revive could be, and they pulled out a ton of power out of his kit, and therefore he's really, really weak because that revive is not as good as you might think. So either way, those are my thoughts, though. Let me know if you've had a different experience either playing as or playing against Akshan on this last sort of week's worth of patch. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts, especially if you've been playing him, if you've been having a lot of success with him, if you've been able to revive multiple allies off of the revive. I'd love to hear all that down in the comment section below, but let me know your thoughts regardless as well. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.